Good morning, Conference. This is my last report as Chair of FE, and I just want to say a couple of words really of thanks to all those people who've served on Federal Executive in the 2 terms that I've served as Chair. Outstanding team of people who worked incredibly hard to both scrutinise the work of the party but also take forward a range of initiatives, and in particular, most recently, work with membership and, of course, over time, the transfers to new headquarters and professionalisation of the party, the bringing in of Connect and a whole range of initiatives that have made the party more professional and more effective. I want to say a particular thank you to Peter Ellis, to Craig Harrow and to John Last, who've been the state party chairs throughout the whole of my time as president. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't say an enormous thank you to the person who's been my vice chair for most of the time as president, Ali Goldsworthy. A big thanks also to Kate Creer, as she now is, to Rachel Clark and to Ashley Day, who have made FE work and will continue to do so in my absence. Many things that we can be very proud of as a party over this last 4 years as a federal executive. I'm grateful to you for having, I'm sure, very carefully read the report. I hope you will agree to pass it. Chair, I have a range of questions in front of me. Should I just go through them, or how would you like to go?
So we do have a whole range of questions. Some of the questions have been withdrawn after the emergency motions debate yesterday afternoon. So if I could ask you to answer question 1 and ask Colin if you would like to ask a supplementary, could you go to the intervention mic, please?
Okay, so you will have seen the question on the note today, which, if I just restate, it asks on what basis the FE agreed that half the elected positions of federal committees must be filled by women, in effect overriding the previously agreed constitutional requirement on gender balance of a minimum 1/3 of each gender without bringing a constitutional amendment to this conference. I mean, my answer to that would be, in many ways, that this matter was kind of dealt with the emergency motion yesterday, and the argument was one that we had then and we didn't win. So, I mean, there is no current, or there was not, at the point that this question was submitted, any requirement in the Constitution, and indeed there still isn't, for any gender balance on federal committees. The decision to include a quota on this occasion was done on a trial basis for this set of elections only, and it was based on advice obtained relating to the Equalities Act 2010. The legal advice received stated if the party reasonably thought that women suffer a disadvantage because of their gender or their participation in an activity, for example, sitting on a party committee, and if we felt that was disproportionately low, then the party was permitted to take action with the aim of enabling or encouraging women to overcome or minimise that disadvantage or participate in party committees. Now, I go into further detail, but I think it would be fair to say that matter was substantially dealt with yesterday. I believe the FE acted in good faith, but we, of course, fully accept the censure that Conference placed upon us. But happy to answer supplementary.
Yes, I think one of the things that we can all agree on in this matter is that there are not enough women in the bodies controlling this party. I believe the FE had some research done which showed that the proportion of women successful at election when they stood was, if anything, better than that of men, which suggests that the problem is that the FE needs to do some work on encouraging more women to come forward as candidates for party committees. And I wanted to ask what work the FE has done, will be doing, and can you make assurances to commit your successor to do something about this?
Well, I mean, thanks, Colin. I think you can certainly say that for some federal committees, indeed party committees of all levels, there has been progress in recent years towards gender balance. I would argue that had an awful lot to do with there being quotas in the first place. And there is evidence that once you set a quota, that even if a quota is lifted, then often we end up in a situation where, having made precedents, then gender balance tends to continue. But there's no guarantee of that, which is why, personally, I believe that we need to maintain quotas for committees. And indeed, of course, we do, following the vote yesterday. But, Colin, you rightly point out, let's be honest, the most glaring failure for our party which is in terms of our parliamentary representation, not just in terms of gender balance, but in particular when it comes to people from ethnic minority backgrounds. I find that particularly troubling. And the work of the Federal Executive specifically, given that we have no provision for guaranteed places or shortlists for any characteristic at a selection level, has been to get right behind and to be the driving force behind the leadership programme, which in terms of selections, as Ros pointed out earlier, is indeed already bearing fruit. Of course, you could argue that 5 years ago we had a fairly reasonable showing when it came to the people who were selected for indeed winnable seats. The problem is, come the day after the election, it was a pretty disappointing balance. And so the job really is, yes, it's important that FE do and continue to do what we've been doing these last few years and promote diversity when it comes to candidate selection. But I would turn it back on everybody else here and say it's your job to get these folks elected. And so the balance of gender and indeed ethnicity within the parliamentary party is corrected.
Thank you, Tim. Now, those of you that have got your daily announcements in front of you will see the questions on pages 4 and 5. Question 2 and 3 have been withdrawn by Duncan Brack as he felt they were dealt with the emergency motion yesterday. And question 4 has also been withdrawn because it's substantially the same as question 8. So if I could ask Tim to now answer question 5.
Okay. So Gareth's question 5 was relating to the Chief Officers group, and he asked when it last met. Well, COG was set up as a result of the Bones report in 2008, and it remains in the Federal Executive Standing Orders as a potential committee, but in practice its functions have been rolled back into the Federal Executive proper. So it has not met since Autumn Conference 2011. Members of what would be the Chief Officers Group attend FE at every meeting to discuss with the committee their work and recent government and party decisions. FE actually decided on this course of action 3 years ago, but of course it is there to be reopened at any time, given it is there in our standing orders.
And is Gareth in the hall wanting a supplementary? No. So there's no supplementary to that. So if I could ask you, question 6 has also been withdrawn because of the emergency motion. So Tim, if you could answer question 7, please.
I think question 7, I'm going to make the case of saying essentially my answer to 7 is pretty much exactly the same as I would have given to 1. The constitutional amendments did not come to this conference essentially because our advice was that we couldn't do so and ask the conference to make a decision which would affect the current set of FE committee and other federal committee elections once the nomination or before the nominations had even closed. That was an issue that was dealt with at the emergency motion yesterday evening. So unless Gareth, I don't think he is here, but unless there's a point in that question that I've not already answered, I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Tim. And there's no supplementary to that question. So we're going to move on to question 8, submitted by Gordon Lishman. Yeah. And if I could ask Gordon to go to the intervention mic if he would like to ask a supplementary.
Great. Well, so thank you very much to Gordon, whose question 8 reads, who takes decisions on the party's strategy? How many written reports have been provided in the last 2 years as a basis for their decisions? And I would reply that the Federal Executive works in tandem with our professional staff, along with the leader and myself, to debate and decide on party strategy, that the Federal Executive's work is largely consensual and productive, in my experience, and we feed into strategy processes and steer the work done in other areas of the party. We have strategic discussions and take decisions at pretty much every, if not absolutely every, Federal Executive meeting. It's difficult to quantify the numbers of papers written relating to strategy, as they encompass everything from employment to campaigning tools to functions delegated to subcommittees such as the CCC. James Girling reports from the wheelhouse to CCC, and the FE receives reports from the CCC.
And Gordon, do you have a supplementary to that?
Sort of. Who is accountable for taking decisions on the party's strategy?
I mean, it's not fixed. I mean, I would argue, ultimately, the strategy and direction of the party, ultimately, is in the hands of the leader. The leader is a member of federal executive, and even in these times when our leader is busier, shall we say, than leaders have been before we entered government, Nick attends, I would say, pretty much every other federal executive meeting, and he's always very open with members, as you know. We have a collective responsibility, conference, federal committees, federal executive, my role, but ultimately we elect a leader to lead, and he provides that strategy and direction, and FE is part of the mechanism which holds him to account.
Thank you. So we're moving on to question 9 on page 5 of the daily announcements.
Also from question 9, is it, Ruth? Sorry, okay. So Gordon's question on the paper, which many of you will have in front of you, but just in case you haven't, how many times in the last 2 years has the FE received report as a basis for decisions on the work and the priorities of the wheelhouse? And my reply to that, Gordon, would be that the Federal Executive delegates campaigning decisions to the Campaigns and Communications Committee. The chair of CCC, James Girling, is a member of the wheelhouse in this capacity, and he, as well as members of the wheelhouse, report back to the Federal Executive on a regular basis. Paddy Ashdown, as chair of the wheelhouse and general election campaign, as you know, has been in person to receive FE views on the 2014 election review and has agreed to come along to future meetings.
Is it not the case that when Paddy actually came to the Federal Executive to report on the wheelhouse, and when somebody asked him how within the party structure he was given the right to take the decisions which the wheelhouse was taking, what he said was that he didn't, as a person or in the wheelhouse, have the power to take those decisions, but that the people who are members of the wheelhouse, including people like the President and the Chair of the English Party and the Chair of the Campaigns and Communications Committee, had to report on what was happening in the wheelhouse back to their bodies, and that would provide the basis for decisions which would give effect to what the wheelhouse decided. And if in fact Paddy did that, as indeed I think we both know he did, isn't it a little odd that at no stage has there been a formal report to the FE on what's happening in the wheelhouse with recommendations to support decisions that are being made there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a member of the wheelhouse myself, and we have had discussions relating to a general election campaign at many, if not most, federal executives one way or another. And when there's been substantive issues, we had a discussion at the last but one meeting, given we had a meeting this week, which related to the decisions over key seats, without being overly specific with any particular seats. And that's something we would expect to continue. That obviously is for the next federal executive to decide how they take that forward. But it strikes me that, A, you can expect Paddy Ashdown to come back himself to future federal executives, but we have a mechanism through the chair of the CCC being a member of the wheelhouse, who is, of course, a member of the federal executive, being the channel through which accountability and decisions can be held in future.
Thank you, Tim. And question 10.
Okay. Gordon's question is, who decides on the party's messages and slogans, and on how many occasions in the last 2 years have proposals with alternatives been made to them? Good question. My answer is that we employ professional staff who make recommendations based on wide-ranging research and polling. Recommendations go to CCC and Wheelhouse. Specifically, sign-off was sought from James Girling as chair of the Campaigns and Communications Committee, Nick Clegg as party leader, and Paddy Ashdown as chair of the 2015 campaign. In response to the nearing general election and thoughts raised during the recent election review, a revised slogan and message script are in the process of being agreed. In fact, I think being revealed at this conference.
Do we have a supplementary to question 10?
No, I think the answer speaks for itself.
Okay, thanks, Gordon.
So if we could go on to question 11, please.
And 11. And so Gordon's question is, what does the President understand about the Federal Executive's responsibility for directing, coordinating and implementing the work of the party, and how has he fulfilled this role? Well, and I'd say, Gordon, I mean, although it's all I've known as President and as Chair of the FE, being in government has nevertheless presented a kind of unique challenge to the Federal Executive's ability to direct the work of the party. And as Chair of FE, I've tried to make sure that the committee has input into fundamental strategic decisions relating to our role in government, and where that has not been possible, we've held our leadership to account. I've also ensured that we work closely and effectively with our professional team in headquarters, helping us to work on major projects such as increasing our membership. And I also want to make clear that Federal Executive has a number of extremely good, brilliant, experienced members, like yourself, Gordon, who spend considerable time supporting the party at all levels, but that we must not stray into doing the work of our professional party. As an FE, we agree priorities and projects. Personally, I don't think it's my job to micromanage our very able staff.
And supplementary.
In view particularly of yesterday's discussions, might not it have saved everybody a lot of time and trouble if more effort had been putting into coordinating the work of the FE with that of other key party committees, including the Conference Committee?
Yeah, and I could do a forensic analysis of why we ended up where we did yesterday, and I and the FE would have to take responsibility for a degree of that, but not all of it. I think there was a way in which we could have not ended up where we were yesterday, and not all of it is down to the Federal Executive's position. I think we acted in good faith, but I think it's fair to say that the censure was at least in part deserved.
And question 12, please.
So Gordon's question here is, how many reports has the Federal Executive received on the management of the party's assets, risk management, internal and external audit, crisis management and disaster recovery? Well, the functions in the question, in my response, I would say are delegated to the Federal Finance Administration Committee, and the chair of the FFAC is a non-voting member of FE, and he reports back to the committee on FFAC's decisions and discussions. A written report was presented to the FFAC in June, and a verbal update is now a standing item on the agenda.
I recall the agreement on providing those reports because, as you will recall, I was the person who raised the fact that it might be a good idea. Is it not a constitutional requirement that the body responsible for overseeing those things on behalf of the party, that is specifically management of the party's assets, but also the other areas which have been devolved to that limited company, have to be fully reported? And it seems a little odd that those functions are not generally reported. And in particular, it seems a little odd that those people responsible for the management of the party's overall assets do not report to the FE. And I'm sure you'll recall that you did give me an assurance, I think 13 months ago, that there would at least be an annual report on these matters to the FE.
Okay. I think my response to that is that that constitutional responsibility is absolutely fulfilled, and we have, as Federal Executive, as subcommittees in the case of FAC, an outstanding group of people who perform that function and do indeed provide reports to Federal Executive regularly. I'll undertake to ensure that we have at least an annual report, as you suggest. But I think it would be wrong to suggest that we're not on top of this when the FFAC performs that role admirably.
Lovely. And question 13, please.
So question 13 is from Gordon Lishman again, and the question on the paper, if you have it in front of you and if you don't, it is, to whom is the Chief Executive accountable? What systems are there for appraisal, personal development and target setting, and how many formal appraisals have taken place? Well, I line manage 2 members of HQ staff. The Chief Executive is one of them, and in my role as party president, appraisals and target setting take place on a yearly basis across the federal organisation, and I conducted the Chief Executive's appraisal in the last month.
And do we have a supplementary to that question? No, in that case, if we could go on to question 14, it's submitted by Mark Pack, so if I could ask him to be ready at the intervention mic for a supplementary.
Yeah, Mark asks a very fair question, and it's a fair cop. He asks, what were the dates and locations of publication of the meeting reports promised for after each committee meeting at the March conference Q&A? So the reality is that this was something that was agreed at the spring conference in York, and FE has not yet started uploading the meeting reports as agreed, essentially because of delays over a staff handover. I will not just endeavour to make sure this happens as soon as possible. FE met earlier this week, and the report will be placed on Lib Dem Voice within days.
And Mark, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for that, Tim. I would just ask you to maybe reflect on the problems the FE has run into in several debates through this conference, and whether, in fact, a more regular reporting schedule in future would help alleviate some of those problems. And I hope you'll put in place those systems before your successor takes over.
Okay. I mean, it's a fair point, and the reality is that this should have happened. I think the explanation that staff handover is the trigger is not an excuse. And the burden and responsibility falls with me. So, yeah, we'll ensure that happens.
So that is the last